Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Creative Heart. And this week we are looking at asymmetrical or asymmetry in your composition. So, this is quite a profound and powerful statement kind of way to use composition because of its asymmetry or perceived imbalance. But asymmetry, if it's done correctly, will still appear balanced to the viewer, yet more interesting. So I cannot wait to explore this form of composition with you today in my art journal. So give me a second, I'll turn the camera around and I'll show you how. Alright, good afternoon everyone. This is exciting. Let's get into our next compositional prompt. And this week we are going to be looking at asymmetry. I really think it's fun because it is a little bit more exciting and dynamic. We all know a normal balanced symmetry. We will be looking at that a bit later. But today we're going to be playing with everything being a little bit off balance. And even though we are going to be using an asymmetrical composition, it is very important to try and maintain a visual weight between the two so that there is a visual balance, so that it doesn't feel like the canvas is going to topple over. So this is going to be exciting. So I'm going to get right into it today. And I already drew 3 prompts to get my creative brain going for the day. And the 3 that I drew was neutral color, dots, and repeat smaller and larger shapes. So that is really helpful. So whenever I get stuck in my composition, I like to just go to my prompts to further inform me of what is possible to achieve on my page. So I've turned the page and I decided to use my neutrals today. The papers that I got here, I've got some of my tissue papers out for a change, and these are some of the papers that I think will work well with our compositional prompt today, seeing that we're doing dots and organic shapes and neutral colors. So gray is definitely a neutral color, and I decided to play with the metals today as well. And I think metals like gold and silver can be classified as neutral. It is not in the color wheel per se. So with the exception of this paper of mine where I do have some red spots, the only color that you see here today is black, white, gray in all its varieties of shades. And some of my copied paper that I drew myself, maybe I'll show you how you can use that. So I think I'm going to put this red one aside. I still want to photocopy this before I make use of it. Then I have that in my collection, so I'm going to put that aside for now. And this is what we are going to be playing with today to create our asymmetrical composition. So it's fun to have these lightweight tissue papers because they are thin, they are easy to add to the collage, and they're not as heavy, so you can layer a lot more of the tissue papers on top of each other. But I thought to initiate this page of mine, I thought I was going to use my silver. So in a way, saying this is a gray background but with a bit of a metallic sheen, I think will be more interesting. And then maybe later I'll play with some gold as an accent. So I'm going to go ahead and dispense some of my silver acrylic paint. And what I have here is Winsor & Newton's Galleria acrylic silver, and I have the same one here in gold. You can see all the splatter on my tube. And I've got a mop brush here, a gallery goat mop, and I'm just going to use that to just diffuse my silver paint onto this page and give it a nice silver glow, to just prepare the page and start to talk about neutrality and just give the page a little bit of a metallic glow, so that it's not just white gesso. But I also didn't want to make the background too busy. Sorry, my goat mop is shedding because it's very new and I haven't worked with it. I think I worked with it once, so it's shedding a bit. So I'm just going to get these hairs off and finish painting my background in a nice silver. Right. Asymmetrical balance results from an equal visual weight on each side of the composition. One side of the composition might contain a dominant element, which could be balanced by a couple or more lesser focal points on either side. One visually heavy element on one side might be balanced by a handful of lighter elements on the other. Asymmetrical balance is more dynamic and interesting. It evokes feelings of modernism, movement, energy, and vitality. Asymmetrical balance offers more visual variety, although it can be more difficult to achieve because the relationship between the elements are more complex. Asymmetry and symmetry can be used throughout a composition, independent of, yet while contributing to, the final balance. You can have symmetrical forms in an asymmetrically balanced composition and vice versa. Symmetry is usually seen as beautiful and harmonized. However, it can also be seen as static and dull. Asymmetry tends to be more interesting and dynamic, despite not being regarded as intrinsically beautiful. Sure, that was a big word. Asymmetry and asymmetrical forms can lack the balance of symmetrical forms. Although you can asymmetrically balance an entire composition, asymmetry is rather common in natural forms. You're probably right or left-handed. Fiddler crabs have different sized claws, tree branches grow in different directions, clouds have random shapes. Asymmetry creates more complex relationships between elements, and so it tends to be more interesting than symmetry. Because it's more interesting, asymmetry can be used to draw attention. Space around asymmetrical forms is more attractive. Unpredictable patterns are created, and overall you have more freedom of expression with asymmetry than with symmetry. The trade-off is that it's harder to achieve. Much in the same way that similarity and contrast work together, you can combine symmetry and asymmetry to good effect. Balance symmetrical forms in an asymmetrical way, or balance asymmetrical forms symmetrically. I can't believe these big words. Break up symmetrical forms with a random mark to add interest. Contrast symmetry and asymmetry in your composition to make elements get more attention. I'm just laughing because this was a lot of fun to just read to you guys. I just Googled a little bit here and I found an interesting article by Design Principles, shingmagazine.com, and they were talking about design principles, compositional, symmetrical, and asymmetrical balance. So do check that out and read that article for yourself. So thanks for watching. Right, I think this is a great start to our asymmetrical composition. So I've let this dry mostly, and I think we've got a very good dark foundation, but we do need a bit of contrast in order to just bring a little bit more complexity to this page. So I have decided these little dots, which is part of my composition, just went too black for me because the tissue paper is very see-through. So I just grabbed my white Posca pen and I'm just going to fill in these little spots or dots that was part of this design, just to bring that forward a bit again, bring some contrast to the page, more visual interest, more drama, and just develop the layers a little bit better. So this is the one thing about collage that I do love, and it is a tip that I can give you, because I think if you're a beginner, I figured out that, you know, it is necessary to sometimes incorporate your pages. And what I mean with that is do something that makes the layers of your collage seem like one. And whether that is to add another element or to add another medium, whatever you think the page needs from you in order to stand out is what you need to add. And sometimes that's a different medium, like adding some, you know, Posca pen, some paint, another layer of collage that's maybe able to give you a bit of contrast and so forth. So you can now already see how this little element stands out a lot more than before, but I created that or achieved it by adding another medium that is able to just, you know, marry things together a little bit. So looking at this page, I do feel like I need a little bit more contrast, and I also want to repeat whatever I do in the one shape I want to do in the other. So I'm going to focus maybe on a piece like this in there somewhere. That looks good to me. And now you don't have to necessarily continue covering everything up. You get to a stage where you have developed your page enough to see, you know, okay, you only need a little bit of something else. You don't need a lot, and you can put it on the side or next to it. So you have to play with your shapes and sort of develop the complexity of your design until you're happy. You know, it's all about the layers. So it doesn't matter whether you are painting only or if you're doing collage, it's all about the layers. So now I've got some distinct shapes in which I can play and further develop it, making it interesting, dramatic, and so forth. And coming back to my prompts of dots and repeat smaller and larger shapes. So this way you can see that these dots are a lot smaller than these dots. These dots are a lot bigger, you know, so I have variety. I've got one enormous dot, if you want to call it, and a smaller one. So now I can continue to develop this and bring in a bit of contrast. I do feel like we need a bit of light in here. So I think that's helping me to achieve that. And then also remember the transparency of some of your papers. Like if I want to use another layer of that printed one, it's just like a ghost print of it, but it will be very translucent. So I can use that around the edge to give me another variety. Then the lines won't be as dark as that. So that is what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to continue to further develop the tension between these two shapes that gives me an asymmetrical composition. So I'll get into that. I really like the layers that I have developed in this asymmetrical composition, but I also feel besides the patterns, the dots, the shapes that relate these two spaces to each other, I also want the viewer to be directed to the tension between these two spaces. So I've taken the time to take out a little bit of a flower there and another leaf, because I wanted to sort of point at each other in a way and sort of relate to each other, so that the two spaces have something in common and there's something within them that directs the viewer to stay within the composition. And that is basically the biggest dynamic aspect of composition, and why we use composition and why it was developed and understood by the masters for a long time, and why it is part of the art world. And this leans a little bit more success to composition and to art, so that, you know, you're looking at professional artists and you wonder, why is their art more successful than mine? Because it's not about your brush marks, it's not about, you know, how you color in or create or collage or whatever. It is about composition. So you can have phenomenal skills and brush mileage under your belt, and you can use all the professional products that's available in the world. But if you don't use composition, there will always be something that is bugging you about your art. And the way to get over that, or to grow beyond the sort of mediocre aspect of maybe something that you're creating, maybe it's out of balance, maybe it's out of proportion, maybe you've never heard of all the principles in art or the elements in art, maybe you have no idea of all the options in composition that is available to you, and that it is an intense study that is available, you know, when you go to art school, or even if you do your own research like I do. It is always phenomenal to see what is available out there and to learn something new. So I hope that you are inspired in some way, shape or form, that you've learned something new, you've maybe seen another person's interpretation of, you know, composition and asymmetrical composition and the things that we're going through. So I'm really hoping that you find this helpful and inspirational and insightful in some way. I'm not, you know, professing to be an art professor at all. Like I said, my journey is all about learning about art on my own and exploring ideas through my research and in my art journal, and figuring it out for myself. And sometimes that means that something isn't working, or it isn't quite nailing it, but you know, that's okay, because with every attempt that you try in your art journal or wherever you prefer to work, you learn something about composition, about your own style, about your own interpretation of that. And therefore I believe that nothing is ever a waste, because even if you know, fail at something, you've learned, and the whole idea is then to persist and try again, and take the lessons that you did learn from each lesson and apply it to the next. And in this way, we become better at what we do. So I quite like where we've sort of arrived. I'm going to allow this to dry and give it a minute or two and see if it needs something more. I do think that this shape can be completed. That might be interesting. You know, it feels a little bit too much of a barrier moving through here. So I think I must further resolve this area, either soften that corner, or, you know, sort of finish this shape so that the viewer finds harmony within this. And also, Besides these two elements that relate to each other, I do like to connect the two shapes in some way, shape or form, even if it's just with a bit of line, but we'll do that when this is all dried. I do like to come in with my oil pastel as a sort of way to resolve some of the issues or layers, or if I see that I need another collage element, then I will add that too. I definitely still want to play with my gold paint. Maybe I did keep this toilet paper roll, because this is also a great way to stamp shapes in a different form and size than what we already have, and maybe that will sort of resolve and bring everything together. We do need a final focal point, so I'm going to allow this to dry and then give it some thought, and when I come back to finish up this page, then I'll share with you guys exactly how we're going to. Right, I've given this some time to dry, and it's exciting because I think it's coming together nicely. I just added this little piece here. I felt that it needed something. So what I got here is my permanent marker, and I just want to bring some of these lines to completion to help further communicate what it is that we are creating here. So some of these flowers petals are a little bit broken, so I thought I would just continue the story with my marker. And just marry these little pages together. See, now the eye won't even know the difference. I quite like that. That is exciting. I also wanted to repeat my little Posca escasize. My word. Some days I can just laugh at what comes out of my mouth. I'm sure you're going to learn to appreciate my tongue twisters. So what I meant to say was I'm just going to repeat my Posca dots here as well to unify the page and to repeat what I've done in that section. And I just want to round off. There we go. That looks literally like an entire little zone. You don't even know that it was straight because now that's all blended out, and I quite like that. Okay, cool. So what else do you guys think this page needs? I do feel that the shape feels slightly interrupted here with a straight line. So this is broken up, this, what shall we call it, bridge that is over these shapes. But I do feel like if I do draw a line, that it might just marry everything together to the viewer's mind. That feels much better to me, and I do like the difference in this little spot here. Forgive me. That looks nice. Well, I think we've sort of come to a conclusion in the sense of our main composition. So what we need now maybe is just a little bit of play. And I did say that I want to add a little bit of gold, and I want to maybe use this to stamp some circles on there. I don't know, will it be too much? Will it be too little? I don't know, hey? I'm thinking. I think I'm going to think a little bit longer and just sit and stare at this composition. And if I decide to bring in gold or do anything else to this, I will record it and let you know. But yeah, I think this pretty much sums up what asymmetrical composition could possibly look like. You need to look at your space of your canvas or of your art journal, and the whole idea is to have a major shape somewhere and then a smaller shape repeating in one way or another. So there needs to be sort of a relationship or a tension between the two. Doesn't matter where you place it on the page. And then, you know, there's a third little element that I think also that we need to consider, and that is the rule of threes, you know, because 2 is very balanced in that sense. Even though this is big and this is small, we might need a smaller third party to just balance the composition. But I'm gonna meditate on that before I commit to that and see if it's really necessary. But we do have a very good asymmetrical composition here, and I hope that it inspires you. So if you're new to my page and you've watched this far, welcome. Remember to hit that subscribe button and the like button and the notification bell, because I do bring out a weekly episode. And right now we are in the 4th or 5th episode of a series where we're looking at composition in this art journal. So you don't want to miss out on any of that. And if you are looking for a community, just look at the description of this video. You'll find some links to some of my stuff. And there you'll also find a link to my Facebook group, which is my private art group. That is where I encourage you, and it gives you a safe space to share your composition with me. So do take a photograph of your exercise in your art journal and share it with me there. You don't have to wait for a Friday to share material that is current. Like our current series is all about composition, so you can post as much of that as you want. But on a Friday, we share, you know, our private art or our art, so to say, that's not necessarily related to what we are discussing that week. And it gives you free reign, all mediums welcome, show and tell. So that is just a safe environment where you can learn to become vulnerable, and you're also welcome to ask for feedback. If you honestly want feedback from the group, as far as your art is concerned, if you want to test the water and see what people perceive in your art, that is a safe space to do that, because we know how much courage it takes in order to show up and share. And there you have it. We completed our beautiful asymmetrical composition, and we played with neutral colors of silver, black and white and gold, kept it very simple, and I quite enjoyed using all of these self-made papers. And in the end I did decide to bring in a little bit of gold. I felt that this main part here on our page needed a little bit of emphasis, and by bringing in a little bit of gold, you can see how it glimmers and shines. It just draws the viewer's eye into this main part of the composition. And then these leaves and dots that I've added point at our second composition over here, that's also asymmetrical all by itself in how I've put everything together. And then in the end I did decide the rule of 3 is a good idea for this composition, just to balance it visually. But I used the ghost print of the little flower line work that we have, and I placed a little bit of that neutral tissue paper over it, repeating some of the shapes that I've used throughout the composition. So it's quiet, it's at the background, it's pushed back, and it just balances this composition for me, even though it's still asymmetrical. If you look at the page and you divide it in half, you'll see that a majority of the material that we've placed on our page is on the right, and lesser part of it is on the left. So it definitely still qualifies as an asymmetrical composition. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to sharing more with you, and I'll see you again next week for another episode of The Creative Heart. So thanks for watching, and bye bye for now.